Whereas the more traditional companies that like their engineering, let's say muscle is not as developed, they would go for a more of a package like SaaS solution, which I think,
Yeah.
so like that's a very clear differentiation we're seeing in the market. I would say intuitively that the digital natives do not buy a lot of like a Salesforce, and like it's not their style. Like they would try to go more for the more innovative solutions in the market, right? So which is not the Salesforce Marketing Cloud or Adobe Engage or Target and all these things, right? So like there's are nicer, whether it's Airship.
I don't know if I can say, but they're like the vegans.
Wow, that's like you dug yourself a big hole now.
I know. And kind of the Salesforce and Adobes are more the pre-processed or highly processed foods. And you go from purist to...
I'm not saying anything right now. Okay, this analogy is
No.
100% yours. Okay,
I'm owning this one. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Couch Confidential. Today, I have someone special with me. His name is Elad Simon. He is the CEO, or should I say ZEO, of Zeotap. Elad, super welcome to the episode. I'm super curious to hear more about Zeotap in general, but can you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. First of all, thank you for the kind words, and thank you for the new title of ZEO. I've never...
Yeah,
I know you would have assumed that it would have been a running joke, but I've never had that before. So you're like the first person who suggested that. So
I'll claim that one.
So
then.
please, yeah, that's yours. I mean, if we ever trademark it, it's under your name. Okay, just so you know. So yeah, I'm Elad. My very historical background is in consulting, but I found very quickly that I'm not built for consulting because I like to do stuff. Sorry, all consultants listening to this, but
We'll forgive you.
I felt difficult for the execution part, right? I was yearning for execution. And then I joined Barclays for about 4 years, kind of financial services in London, being like mostly in strategy and operations roles. And then in a very abrupt shift, moved into the advertising world. I joined Google in about, when was it? Actually, it was 2012, something like that. And been with Google for about 5 years, leading their efforts when it comes to bringing in customers into the then AdWords, now Google Ads platform. So you're a very interesting European role. And then joined Taboola, led their SMB business, built and led their SMB business globally. Then I had a stint as a founder in a company called Craft.io, where it was a company in the product management space, completely different. It was part of my general midlife crisis of, I've done big corporates. I've done, like, let's say, scale ups. Now it's time to do a startup. And that was my kind of like going into the world of startups fully as a CEO. Been there for 5 years in the product management space, and then now coming back to the Martech, ad tech, advertising worlds with Zeotap. So that's kind of
because
myself.
It's a huge variation. I mean, you did advertising, you did growth, you did products, you did consulting, but we'll forget about that because, let's focus on the building stuff. How did you stumble upon Zeotap? Because you started out as the COO for a few months and then you rolled into the position of CEO.
Indeed. So, I mean, basically, in a funny turn of events, the chairman of the company I was a founder before also became at some point the chairman of Zeotap. And so, so we knew each other for a long time. We've been working together for a long time. And then when the opportunity came to join Zeotap, I met with Daniel and Prajol, who are the founders. And I really liked them. I liked the space. I thought it was an interesting opportunity. It was an exciting company, an exciting point to join. And so I joined, and then we decided at some point to change roles and basically shifting into the CEO role probably about 4 months after I joined. So that's kind of like, that's the history behind it. So
that's pretty impressive.
You'll
need to teach me that trick.
Sure. No. All you need to know is know somebody who moves somewhere else.
That's it. That's it. It's not what you know, but who you know. And in a lot of cases, it's something my mother has been telling me for years. But before we move into Zeotap, I have to ask this one question, not because I'm a big soccer fan, but is it a prerequisite to be a Bayern Munich fan if we want to work for Zeotap?
You have to say that you're a Bayern Munich fan. You don't actually have to be one, but you have to say it, right? So, on a serious note, Bayern Munich is probably one of our most known customer, at least from like as a global brand. Let's say it this way.
Absolutely, yeah.
and we love them, and we were in the Mexico a couple of weeks, I guess, presenting together with them. So like we're in a very good relationship with Bayern Munich. And so, yes, absolutely, you have to at least have an affinity towards the club.
Yeah, no, I can understand, but it's something that I've underestimated for a lot of years. I've seen, I think, about 2 or 3 other cases where CDPs working with football or soccer, depending where you are in the world, with these clubs, because you really underestimate the reach that they have. It's not just local, it's not even just regional or national, but a lot of these top tier clubs are international. They've got
They're
fans and everything around the world.
they are completely global companies.
Yeah,
Companies is a funny word for them, because I spoke to them, to quite a few people there, and it really is a passion project. It really is a passion business, right? So it is a little bit different than your standard business, because there's so much emotions and enthusiasm about it. So
yeah,
it's kind of difficult to be without that in that kind of business. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, from a fan base perspective, and that's kind of like one of the use cases that we work with them on. It's a super interesting completely international fan base. I mean, we even developed the specific use cases with them, et cetera. And we even actually we're a sponsor on their basketball team as well, which allows us to actually go and enjoy with customers, and sometimes with the people that we want to be our customers in Bayern Munich basketball courts, which is I really probably shouldn't say this, but I'm more of a basketball person than a football person or a soccer person. And this is I know it's the wrong thing to say
yeah.
in many ways,
We'll bleep that out.
but yeah, exactly. Can you please erase that in the recording? And so for me, that's like super exciting on its own, right? So I'm actually going. I
Yeah.
think the week after next, I'm going to Munich to watch Bayern Munich against Bologna, which
Yeah.
which will be very cool.
Even European basketball is underrated. I don't know what it is with all these
Well,
sports.
Germany is the world champion and European champion now. So I mean,
Are they the world champion as
yeah, yeah,
well?
yeah, yeah. So
I thought that was always like, it's
it's
de
usually
facto given to the US.
yeah, no. So clearly you're a basketball fan.
No. I'm a rugby fan. I'm a rugby fan. It's
I see.
but it's
So let's so
I
let's
still
so
need to
let's
get
never
tickets for that.
talk about that, okay? Because I know
Yeah,
I know nothing, like literally nothing about rugby, okay? Like not even I know how the ball is shaped, and that's it.
well, let's talk about something that we do know. Conferences. Like I mentioned, I wanted to talk about Zeotap next, but you mentioned Mexico, and it is something that is on my list to go.
Mm-hmm.
Was this your first time going to New
It
Mexico?
was the first time going to New Mexico, which is kind of funny because I was always supposed to go to New Mexico in Tabula,
Yeah.
specifically in Tabula. I really was supposed to go, and I always kind of, I don't know why, but kind of ended up not going for some reason. Always invited, and this is the first time I go to New Mexico, and it's been, I have to say, it's actually cool. I mean, I can't say that about every
Well, saying to Mexico is cool is like telling my wife Star Wars is cool. It's some people will get it, other people's won't.
Yeah.
So it's
no, but
but
it is a very it's a very big conference. I mean, to state the very obvious, right? So there's a lot of vendors there. There's a lot of clients there, etc. It was an amazing opportunity for me personally to meet a lot of our clients on a face-to-face basis, right? So that's something that I get very excited about. And so that was just in 1 week I could have met, I met 5 or 6 customers in one go, which was was absolutely fantastic, right? So that's always exciting, regardless of the conference itself, etc. We got an opportunity to present there, which was awesome as well. We went together with Bayern Munich, which is what I mentioned, which was we had a master class, if I think it's called. And then I met a lot of people that I knew, right? So from the ad tech and Martech kind of worlds, and I kind of so you just walk around and you just bump into people, which is kind of cool on its own way, right? I mean, again, if you're an ad tech or Martech kind of geek, then then it's kind of cool. And so overall, I would say it was a good experience. The team, I mean, I had quite a few people from the team in there, and again, we feel that it's a good place for us to be in. So we go there every year. We go there every year, so we're kind of excited about that.
I'm just trying to think now. What does the D and D Mexico stand for? Is that for digital or Deutschland?
I'm guessing digital. I don't. I mean, I think it's a digital marketing expo something.
Yeah, and where was it in Germany?
In Cologne.
Oh, so the CEO is for Cologne.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. Because I thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought the D was for Deutsche, because somebody told me that it's very German oriented, at least for the German market.
It is, and I have to say, as a non-German speaker, I felt a little bit kind of like an idiot, to be honest. No, not really, but
no, but the native tongue there is German, of course. Yeah.
but you get around. You get around, and it's kind of okay. By the way, I checked it. As you seem very curious about it, it's the Digital Marketing Exposition and Conference. So
And conference. Oh, okay.
that is
So there's absolutely no reference to Germany in there at all.
whatsoever, not even a little bit.
Yeah. And but so talking about Germany though, and I think that's a great segue to finally talk about why we came here, Zeotap.
So I've heard.
Zeotap is a German company, and it's. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I've been in CDPs for about 7 to 8 years, or as my kids would say, 67. I have no idea what it is, but apparently a lot of people are joking around the 67 thing. But I'll say 7 to 8. I need to
I
look that up.
also heard the 67 joke, and I still don't know what it means as well. So if it makes you feel any better, so
I'm just worried I said something offensive now, but I'll I'll find that
we'll
out
find
later.
out, and maybe we'll cut it in editing.
Exactly. But so 7 to 8 years. But it took me a lot of time to discover Zeotap, and I think I've known for you about you guys for about 3 years now. But you're very focused on the German market, I think, or initially, but you guys are expanding now because I saw the recent news about Sky Italia. So you guys are broadening out beyond Germany. But can you tell me a little bit more about Zeotap, its origins?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, so a couple of things, and it's kind of like depressing as a CEO to hear that from a guy who's in Martech, like you only heard about us like 3 years ago, but it kind of makes sense, right? So if you think about where the company started, so the Zeotap started about 11 years ago, but it started as a more of an ad tech kind of data kind of solution, right? So
Yeah.
it was very much like leveraging at the beginning telco data, and then afterwards European data in terms of helping advertisers, advertise, like target the right audiences, etc. So kind of like if you would imagine something between like a Nielsen or a LiveRamp, like this kind of like stuff, but a very European focused one, right? So like that was the
DMP kind of thing.
but really like with actual segments, right? So actually like
Okay.
with actual data to sell, right? So like
Yeah.
not just the Martech side, but also the actual data side, right? So that was the origin of the company. And then about 5 years ago, and again, this is all history that I'm telling on behalf of because I wasn't there. But about 5 years ago, the company decided to go into the CDP space, and
Okay.
that's I think you mentioned it, it for about 3 years, so it kind of checks, right? So because
Yeah.
it kind of tracks because eventually, the company didn't do CDP until 5 years ago, and that's why still I think specifically outside of Germany, we are not as known as we would like to be, right? So, but we do have very large customers in Germany and outside of Germany and in Italy as well, and so that we're very much of a European focused player, and we operate in several markets in Europe, expanding more and more markets as we speak. And we are also actually this year like expanding into the Middle East, and that's where like
That place is wild.
I know.
That is very active, and because you guys work mostly on Google Cloud, if I remember correctly,
Yes,
that's just opened up in Saudi Arabia. I mean,
we are well aware.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, I can imagine.
that entire region is going through like an amazing transformation process, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
was watching with my son yesterday on Netflix the Six Kings tournament in Saudi. I don't know if you know that this is a tennis tournament, and which is like and you can just see like there's a lot of effort in connecting the dots between East and West, which I find very cool.
Yeah.
On a global basis, just kind of like looking at how the world is evolving. But also, I think there's a real push in that region, and we're very excited to take part of that in that sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
In our small way, of course, not to.
I wouldn't necessarily say small, and more in a unique way, because the things that I have heard about Zeotap, and I'll let you elaborate on those, is that, that there is I think there was an article at the end of last year, Michael Cass saying a lot of the features around CDPs have been commoditized. If you look at one, you can, the ideas have been copied into all these other ones. And I mean, in your opinion, how does Zeotap stand apart from other mainstream CDP solutions?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I think, I mean, the first one, and I think that's really what's been driving the success of the company, and it's to do with the origin story as well, is
Yeah.
what we call audience boost, right? So we have this module called audience boost, which basically allows you, like our customers, to take their first party data and then enrich it with our identity graph so that they're able to increase the match rates when they send their first party data into, let's say, advertising platforms like Google, Meta, TikTok,
Yeah.
etc. And it's a very simple idea, basically saying, I have Matthew, I have his maid, or I have his email, or I have his cookie, but I don't have an identifier that Meta recognizes. And so I'm enriching the same Matthew with an identifier from an identity graph, another identifier of Matthew. And as a result of that, now it matches. in Meta or in Google. And now, as a result of that, when metrics increase, then your efficiency of marketing campaigns just becomes better, right? So if you're
And there's a bit of legacy from that ad tech period.
exactly
Yeah.
the way in general, the way I like to think of companies, that especially if they've done like an evolutionary process in their product portfolio, is that
Yep.
there's always an origin story, right? So like, and this is our origin story, and that like I keep telling the team, like, it's almost like karma that's our claim to fame in the market, because that's how the company became what it is, right? So, and so I like that. I really enjoy the fact that we're and this is honestly, and you'll interview 100 CEOs that always say like, this is honestly for sure the one thing that we do best than anybody else. But the truth be told, I mean, and we're willing to test that with anybody else in the market. There's first of all, there's really very few solutions like this in Europe. It's very uncommon.
That's true.
It's
That's
it
true.
is.
Yeah.
I mean, in many cases, especially the American players, and I know we're going to talk about that potentially later. But the American players, they shy away from data in Europe. It's kind of
Yeah.
like a very scary space for them. And we are, a German privacy first, GDPR first, e-privacy kind of startup. And we feel very comfortable because that's been our business for a very long time. And
Yeah.
so as a result of that, we feel very comfortable operating in that space. And it really is a competitive advantage for us. So that's, I would
Yeah.
say, sorry, go ahead.
No. Because I was just thinking, as far as I can remember, Germany has always been a very tough market to get into, especially, and this was before GDPR, but it's just because they've been hammering on privacy for so long.
Of course.
And when you talk about data storage, if you want to store anything outside of Germany, 9 out of 10 times the company will say, "Sorry, we won't do business with you."
Absolutely.
So in essence, it's understandable that you're going to see local players like Zeotap. But before we continue, because I just mentioned that whole legacy ad tech part a couple of months ago, I think it was like 2 months ago, there was this news on LinkedIn that Zeotap had been acquired.
I
But
know.
can you quickly explain and get
Yes.
rid of all the conspiracy theories out there in the
Yes.
market
And
right now?
I even
What was that about?
I even had a beef with some. I'm trying to remember where the lady was from.
Michelle Nieberding, or was that it?
Potentially, yes, potentially.
Michelle, sorry, Michelle.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's kind of a funny. I mean, every ecosystem has this like LinkedIn echo chamber of
Oh
people.
yeah.
I'm sure you know them, right? So I'm
Yeah.
sure you can name all of them almost, right? So, and it's like,
Almost.
and it's almost really, it's like its own echo chamber of like people, like kind of like
Yeah. Oh, but in all fairness, it is a nice community. The
no,
bubble, at
no,
least the bubble that I'm in.
yeah, no, it's.
Yeah.
I didn't mean it in a negative way, but it's like, it's kind of funny to see this. It's like, whenever you look at comments, we kind of like look at LinkedIn,
Yeah.
you always see the same people, right? So it's kind of funny
True.
to see that, like, it's an actual community, which I mean, of course, we're friends with and very excited. Anyway, long story short, as we said, the origin of the company was the ad tech business, and we recently sold that ad tech business. Like
Yeah.
that part of the business has been sold. So what we call Zeotap Data, which is like the data that has been sold to a company called Rokad, which is another German-based startup in the ad
Yeah.
tech space. And we have an exclusive partnership with them for the next 5 years, basically to kind of like buy back our own identity graph from them, so that
I was just about to say that kind of you don't lose that IP then.
no, absolutely not. And that we continue to be the only CDP in Europe that has that, right? So like that's the nice thing about the structure of the deal. But yes, but we have sold that part of the business, but we have not. Zeotap is still on its own, of course, a standalone business on the CDP side of things. Absolutely. And so that's like the clarification of that misunderstanding on LinkedIn, right?
Well,
The whole company was never sold. It was just the ad tech part or the data business.
yeah. So I'll have to reset that bingo card. I think
Yes,
Michelle had.
yes.
We're so close, so close.
I really asked her to reset that bingo card, and she was like, "Nope, you sold something. The bingo card applied." I'm like, "Okay, fine, never mind."
Well,
It was funny.
if you put it that way, yeah, okay, you did sell something then at least.
Yeah,
So
it's an argument. I didn't know the rules of the bingo, right? I just wasn't fully
there are no
aware.
rules. It's not like Fight Club.
No,
I mean,
I
come
know,
on.
I know.
You mentioned, so we were talking about Germany. You guys are in Germany, but you guys have clients internationally.
Yes.
But as I was speaking to another vendor a few podcasts ago, I think it was last season, we came to the topic of data sovereignty. And this was I think when the American president or that new administration sat down and finally started taking control. There was a lot of unease between the countries and across the Atlantic. Is this where having a local player kind of comes into play for companies who are uncertain about what's going to happen with their data, working with US vendors? Because you just mentioned, US companies are kind of wary of choosing a European vendor because your data will be stored here, different rules. How have you been experiencing that with Zeotap as a predominantly European company?
So, in an ideal world, I would have wanted to say it doesn't matter, but the reality,
Yeah.
but the reality, it does really matter, especially since let's say, the latest administration has been really pounding hard on Europe as a whole, whether it's with tariff or just like UN speeches or whatever it is that you want.
That's incredible.
That was
Yeah.
it was a it was a very fun reality moment to watch if it wasn't really our world, right? So, but it is where we live in. Anyway, the long story short is that there is a sentiment, I would say,
Yeah.
around that. And I also think there's always been a little bit of an undercurrent, not like as a sentiment in terms of, but an undercurrent like saying that if an American vendor comes to Europe and they're under investing, as in they're just like bringing a handful of people and trying to service the market very, like,
Yeah.
let's say, in an American way, then it becomes quite hurtful. Like we had our first, no, probably second, but first deal that I've heard it so clearly, somebody saying, I don't want to work with the Americans.
Oh,
And it wasn't because of the software quality. It wasn't like that wasn't an issue. And it also wasn't because of GDPR or anything like that. It was just a little bit of that kind of like feeling of you're not taking us seriously.
yeah.
And so that's like so for me that was an interesting thing, right? So it wasn't, you would expect like data sovereignty, like GDPR, whatever, like the hosting and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It wasn't that. It was more about the fact
I understand.
that
Yeah.
the Europeans feel like I mean, and we have, I mean, as a company, we have people from, I think, probably 10 different countries in Europe, like
Yeah.
in our go-to-market teams. And they're spread across all over Europe. And we're kind of like a remote company. So we're kind of like really spread across the whole continent, and the island next to the continent used to be part of the, part of the,
We won't name names.
yeah, whatever. Yeah. Rhymes with Schmunited Schwindom. Anyway, so we have a lot of people all over the place.
Yeah.
And so, almost by definition, you become culturally sensitive, not in the sense that you understand all cultures and everything, but you know what I mean? There's a certain understanding, like an innate understanding for Europeans, that we are all a little bit different. And there's a little bit
Yeah.
quirkiness here. And, sometimes you make fun of it and some, like it's all, but there is that very innate understanding. And I think sometimes when American vendors can come over to across the pond, they might be a little bit heavy-handed with that, right? So they might assume that like everything works like the US,
Yeah.
which is a very big market, etc. So I think that's kind of that where that sentiment might find a little bit of excitement, which is, I think, more amplified by what's going on in the world. I don't think it's like there. What I mean is like, so what I'm saying is like basically there's a bit of an undercurrent always, and then the recent events have just been kind of like amplifying the story a little bit. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what what you've been experiencing is something that I remember looking back about 15 years ago when tools like Google, no, that's more like 20 years ago, when Google Analytics set up shop here in Europe. You had Omniture Site Catalyst, you had all these major Martech brands, a lot of them from the US,
yeah,
even a few from Campal. Israel was a big big hub
yeah,
of innovation there as well. And I remember working with a lot of Israeli companies in terms of Martech solutions. And there was a whole different culture. I think the Israelis, they understood Europe a lot better. But then when the Americans came in, if you look at the deal sizes, that was one of the giveaways. They would come in with US pricing and like, yeah, but our definition of an enterprise here in the Netherlands, if I was just looking at one country, is like maybe a mid-market company size or maybe even smaller in the US in terms of revenue. So there was no way we could be affording these US based tools within Dutch companies. And I think a lot has been changing over the years, but it's also kind of the pressure. And I've seen situations where you say, no, don't go higher up. You're dealing with me. We're going to get this project sorted out. And because the project slows down, and I don't know if this is, I mean, if there are any Americans watching or listening, uh, please prove me otherwise. I always feel that the sales techniques are a little bit harder, rougher, because they'll go above you. They'll skip the line, go up the chain of
oh
command,
my
so to
God.
speak, and
You
speak to
really don't,
someone more in high
you
senior.
don't want to get me started on that, right? So I mean, like this is, I mean, as I mean, as you can imagine, I mean, you know, probably the two most large American players in the CDP
Yeah.
space are obvious, right? So one is Adobe and one is Salesforce, right? I mean, those are
Yeah.
the two big ones that are competing in this space, and we find ourselves in many cases competing almost in an unfair, competition where like there's a C level going to a C level, sometimes a
We
C
got
level.
tickets for Beyonce and
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. Where it's like, you ask yourself, well, okay, that's one way of buying software, I guess.
Yeah. Zeotap's like, we can give you front row seats at Bayern in Munich, but it's the basketball. And it's just,
Yeah,
just kidding. Yeah.
exactly. And
The
so
influence is incredible.
exactly. And so I think that's definitely something that we're dealing with. I mean, I'm very
Yeah.
proud to say that despite that, right, so we've still freed up quite a lot of customers from these two specific vendors. And I mean,
Yeah.
again, I don't love bad mouthing competition, but I mean, these two ones are, I mean, it's
Sometimes the shoe doesn't fit, you know?
it's not the most impressive tech stack I've seen in my life, right?
No.
So as a result of that, I would say it's one of the it's like it really is like a nice thing for us to be a win against those folks or to replace those folks because we feel we can actually do a much better job than them, honestly.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier about like all the CDPs are commoditized. I don't first of all, I don't think so. I fundamentally I think probably each of them have their own angle, right? So yes, there is probably a 70% overlap in the feature base that is probably, it's not going to be dramatic to differentiate. But then there's
Yeah.
very rarely there's nothing that differentiate this competitor from that competitor, etc. And so, and with Adobe and Salesforce, it's a lot to do with the heavy-handedness of these tools. They're just really old stacks, and as a result of that, you have to bring your data to them rather than them accommodating your data, right? So this
Yeah.
this whole schema concept of like being like you really are forced into a schema, which
Yeah.
is eventually it's engineering resources and it's complexity, right? So like you start not really identifying your own data in a way, right? So we're a player like ours, which is schema agnostic, and you can bring the data, we'll figure it out, kind of thing, right? So
Yeah.
like that's a very different approach to this, right?
And is that kind of the biggest arguments you've been hearing from those people who have been looking to switch away?
No.
No, no.
No, that's like almost like the icing on it. No, in many cases, these people, I mean, those platforms, the implementation just is too long, too cumbersome,
Yeah.
very difficult. Like it's like, I mean, people ended up doing like year long or year and a half long implementation that didn't succeed.
Incredible.
Imagine buying a piece of software and a year and a half later, you're not even started. It's like nuts.
Look how far AI is developed in a year and a half.
Exactly. And so it's like, like the world
It's
around you is like moving, at like, and it's like this thing is just like stuck. And so
yeah.
I think people are, especially in many of the enterprises, they're quite allergic to that. And I think that's like one of the reasons why they prefer vendors like us is because then they know that we're going to make it work faster for them. And they know that like, we're going to be in it to make it happen. And
Hmm.
I mean, that's one of the nice thing of working with a vendor like ours, like or a vendor
Yeah.
of our size, let's say it this way, and the fact that we were independent, we don't try to push all of our other suite products because we don't have them. That's like it's another. You know what I mean? It's like it's one of those things.
Yeah.
You feel like okay, this vendor is here because they're trying to optimize this piece, right? So the data layer and the data architecture for us, that's what we're trying to optimize. So
So, but what is your opinion about these kind of solutions that have everything? Because it's a trend that I've been seeing, especially in mid market in Europe. So that would be small business size in the US.
yeah,
But anyway, what I'm seeing there is that there's a lot of the most common one I'm seeing right now is companies moving away from Salesforce Marketing Cloud or Salesforce Commerce Cloud to solutions like Spotify with a marketplace CEP plugged into that. We're talking the Brazes, Customer IOs, Bloom Reaches, etc.,
yeah.
who do host more features built in. How do you guys view that? I mean, is that I have respect for the pure play companies like you do because you're either what did somebody once say to me, you're either kind of, as a generalist, you're mediocre at everything, but as a pure play, you can really excel and become the expert in one. How have you been experiencing that within the European market? Is it kind of a mixed demand?
Yeah, it's very mixed, to be honest, right? So, I mean, you do have like look, there's a lot of arguments for buying a suite solution and buying a best of breed solution. I mean, like,
Yeah,
both arguments are legitimate.
both means to an end.
Yeah, exactly. I would say two things. One, we've seen really a variety in different companies,
Yeah,
I have yet to have seen, and I think I have yet to have seen one enterprise that has only one solution,
Oh,
like one vendor. I've never seen. So even, I mean,
can of worms.
the whole premise of the best of suite is like you do at least it's a single ecosystem. Everything is taken care of. It just doesn't
Yeah.
exist because I mean, even if it does exist, they buy something and then immediately that company comes in and they have their own activation platform, and now all of a sudden you're stuck again with like two CEPs, right? So
Yeah.
it is actually very rare to see a fully deployed best of suite solution. Very rare. And it could, I think it can mostly happen in mid-market, actually more than the enterprise. So for us, we're very focused on the higher end of the enterprise. Our
Hmm.
customers are usually quite large and our contract size are quite large as well. And so there we feel almost natural that you would go for a best of breed CDP, because the moment you need to activate between two, nothing more, just two activation platforms, you're going to get stuck,
Yeah.
because Adobe is not going to play nice with Salesforce, and Salesforce is not going to play with Adobe. So if you have like that plus Braze or that plus MRSys or that plus some, you're going to get stuck. Your data model the data will not flow as nicely as you want it to flow, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the same as walled gardens, right? So walled gardens play very well with themselves and very poorly with the rest of the ecosystem, right? And it's the same thing with best of suite, like the suite solutions. They play reasonably nice with each other, with itself, but as soon as you leave, if you want to use the CDP of, let's say, Salesforce into a Braze, you know,
Hmm.
it's gonna be difficult because it was built for that, right? It's almost inherently built for this walled garden kind of environment. And so for us, like again, talking about the enterprises, it's a very easy, quote unquote, easy sell to say, it doesn't make sense for you to buy like a Salesforce and Adobe, because you're going to get stuck with them. And unless you're planning on moving everything in your stack to them, which is an
Yeah.
unlikely scenario in practice, because that's not how enterprises behave, then you're better off with the best of breed solution.
And is there a difference between kind of newer companies who may have been completely digital from day one compared to legacy companies who have been around with ticker tapes and I don't know, punch cards and things like that? Is it in terms of adopting new
Yeah,
solutions?
absolutely. I mean, the digital natives. I mean, there's another trend which I'm sure you're familiar with, the whole composable zero
Yeah.
copy kind of thing that's going on with kind of like in the market. I would say that solution, for example, is very much of a digital native solution. So, like for companies that are like they have a very strong engineering
Yeah.
focus and they have a strong engineering team, I understand the allure of like this thing. Although if you look at the zero copy, it's like almost zero copy, and there's cache data. I mean, if you open the
Yeah.
hood just a little bit, you start
I
realizing,
was just about to
well,
say.
it's kind of zero copy, but it's not really ignoring. But it's a nice It's a nice marketing buzz. So we're not gonna bitch
No,
about.
no, no. We're not going to bash it here.
Yeah, but I was saying to your question earlier, I was saying basically, so the digital natives, they play along very well with that. Whereas the more traditional companies that like their engineering, let's say muscle is not as developed, they would go for a more of a package like SaaS solution, which I think
Yeah.
so like that's a very clear differentiation we're seeing in the market. I would say intuitively that the digital natives do not buy a lot of like a Salesforce, and like it's not their style. Like they would try to go more for the more innovative solutions in the market, right? So which is not the Salesforce Marketing Cloud or Adobe Engage or Target and all these things, right? So like there's are nicer, whether it's Airship.
I don't know. I don't know if I can say, but they're like the vegans.
Wow, that's like you dug yourself a big hole now.
I know, I know. And the kind of the Salesforce and Adobe's are more the pre-processed or highly processed foods. And you go from purist to, yeah,
I'm not saying anything right now. Okay, this analogy is
no, 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 no.
100% yours. Okay.
I'm owning this one. But it's still amazing to see that. I mean, one of the biggest questions that I have around composable and I is more, there's never a clear picture about the total cost. And I think you pointed that out is that it really look the tool you choose, it doesn't really matter if you have a problem and this tool can solve it with the resources that you have, then you're on a good path.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of confusion in the market right now. That's why I try to jump in and help companies is that they can't make the distinction anymore. Should we go composable? But what is the impact of composable? Do you have the engineering resource? Do you have the architecture
Yeah.
to work with that? And that's those cases are quite often overlooked, my opinion. But it's I mean, human resource is a big thing. So if we look at Zeotap, what would kind of be the ideal uh, available resources within a company to work with a tool like Zeotap? I know you guys plug natively into, you guys are Google Cloud native, so plugging into
Yeah, well, I mean,
BigQueries and the likes.
from
And
a source perspective, we plug into anybody, right? So
yeah,
it could be, of course, Google Cloud, but it doesn't matter. I mean, the fact that our infrastructure is sitting on Google Cloud,
oh, that was it. Yeah,
it doesn't matter at all. I mean, we connect to Databricks, we connect to Snowflake, we connect to any type of data warehouse that you have, Redshift,
yeah,
whatever. We will connect to it, and any other type of data, whether it's your web stream or your click stream, etc. We will connect to it, whether they via an
yeah,
API or via whatever. I mean, there's sources is never limited to anything, right? So because otherwise we won't be able to compete in the market, right? So I mean,
sure.
it's almost unseen that you have enterprises even using like one cloud or one data warehouse. Even that is
Yeah,
very very uncommon, right? So we see that a lot. So absolutely we connect to pretty much everything and anything. And again, that's part of the story that we're trying to cater to, let's say. But the companies that I would say are the best fit to work with us, I would say, are companies that are not necessarily digital native. So we work very well with the more traditional kind
yeah,
of companies. And from a resource perspective, I mean, we don't ask them for anything, to be honest, right? So I mean, eventually, of course, there's going to be some implementation effort around this, but because of our approach, I mean, we're extremely like kind of like religiously use case driven, as in first and foremost, we sit down like whatever, like one day after the contract is signed, and we say, okay, tell us what you want to achieve first, second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. And we build a list of like, I don't know, 20, 30, 50, 100 use cases. And then we start like basically going reverse engineering from that point backwards. We don't like say, okay, now let's look at your entire data architecture and everything. Of course, we do
mhm,
that a little bit so that we are future ready as well. But the use case is what guides us, like eventually. So you will find in many cases that we start ingesting just a sub portion of the data because we know that that would activate the use case very fast. And like
yeah, yeah,
we're our aim, and we are successful, I would say probably 60, 70% of the times, is within 8 weeks to be live with the first use case. 8 weeks from the moment people like blow the whistle and say, okay, now let's get going. And
yeah,
there's a project team on their side, there's a project team on our side going. Like that's our aim. Sometimes it takes, instead of 2 months, it takes 3 months, but we're not far off from it. Right? And looking at other CDP implementations where, things that, as I said earlier, like sometimes takes a year. It's impossible to imagine a situation where you have like, a year to wait until software, forget about realizes ROI, just starts working, like actually
yeah,
starts doing things. So for us, like that's where we want to focus. So, I mean, so that's like what we expect eventually from our customers, to have somebody on the other side to work with
yeah,
us on this kind of stuff. One of the tricks that we've learned actually very nicely from one of our customers, from Luke from Entain. Luke is a guy who's leading the CDP in Entain. And he basically said like he's always at least 1 quarter, or if not 2 quarters ahead in terms of an engineering demands from his team. So basically, if you have a use case you want to implement in Q3, you want to ask for the resource in Q1 kind of thing,
yeah,
right? So and I know it sounds very tactical and generic, but it's actually a very good trick of like basically saying, because what a lot of people do, they say, okay, now let's implement this use case. Now they go to engineering and they say, okay, yeah, well, let's wait for another quarter because we're stuck because we don't have the resources. So I think actually building a use case roadmap and deriving from it a technical roadmap and
yeah.
actually sharing that early on is the way to go. And that's like,
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
and that's kind of,
And
and yeah,
you need to consider that not everything can be self-serve. You might have data points missing. You might have some consent integration missing. So
yeah,
it,
absolutely.
it definitely takes a lot of planning. When you talk about these counterparts with the clients, I'm very curious. Are these mostly marketing people or engineering? And then how many of those cases do you actually deal with cross-functional teams?
So the unfortunate answer is both, right? So it's marketing and technology people. So we've seen different models when it comes to like where does the Martech function sit, or
Yeah,
where does the CDP lead sit, right? So we've seen either in tech or in business, and I don't know that there is a necessarily a one size fits all kind of answer to where they should sit. I think eventually it's more of
yeah.
a organizational question than it can work either way, is what I'm trying to say.
But then the other question is: it more? Do you deal with cross-functional teams, or is it just one person?
No, it's absolutely cross function. It's absolutely. I mean, the Martech team almost by its nature is a cross-functional team, right? So it's dealing with a lot of
The ideal situation.
yeah, yeah, and no, and it is how it is in most of our customers, right? So it's very, very common that we deal with like cross-functional teams. It is, of course, complicated because eventually, in many cases, they are dealing with them, but they don't own any of them, right? So it's like
Yeah.
the level of influence that they have is very, let's say, varied across different organizations. And a lot of what we do is actually like change management, the marketing transformation, like stuff that is, you wouldn't think of it as like the core of a CDP, but the reality, when you bring in a CDP and you want to actually run a successful CDP implementation, you actually mean that you are changing things in the way you do marketing quite meaningfully. And sometimes I feel sometimes companies underestimate that piece in the puzzle of bringing in a CDP. Eventually, the whole story of like, omni-channel orchestration and like, and like breaking down data silos, which is like, all the buzzwords around CDPs, they involve change management. And
Yeah.
this is the part.
And the organizational impact is so neglected
Yeah,
when a CDP is
absolutely.
brought in.
It's like it's almost like there's an assumption like we'll bring a solution and it will solve everything, right? So, but very rarely,
Still to this day.
and it very rarely works like that, right? Like, and you see, I'm still kind of like puzzled. I mean, I was a marketeer for many years in my life, right? So in Google and at Taboola, I was leading like large marketing organizations, and you fully understand like I mean, there's always needs to be a layer that streamlines the journey of a consumer, right? So like a consumer or a customer, it doesn't matter. Like there has to be a team, a set of people that think of this whole journey from start to finish. And it's very rare in companies. Like even in very large enterprises, these people don't exist. And then you end up with these silos of like, okay, this is the team that does CRM. This is the team that does email marketing.
Yeah.
This is the team that does who manages the app. And I'm like, well, I'm a consumer. Do I need to see something very differently dramatic between my app and my email? I don't think so. I expect if I'm talking to, company XYZ who is a consumer brand, I would like to see reasonably the same messaging, the same
Yeah.
offers, and the same creative around it, right? So I don't want to see like,
Very true.
but it's different teams completely, right? So they're completely,
Yeah.
and there's nothing to orchestrate above that. And so in a lot of cases, people bring a CDP and think, okay, that will solve it. But actually, there's a process and change management around it that is kind of missed as part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually talk about that the CDP is a mirror for the internal organization. It really starts reflecting how you operate as a team internally, or don't, because you all work in silos.
It's a very good analogy. It's just that many people don't like mirrors.
No, but not when I looked in the mirror this morning. I need to get back to the gym a little bit more often and start running.
Exactly.
Winding down here because
Sure.
we're reaching the top of the hour. What's in store for Zeotap in 2020 you can reveal? I mean, it's 2.5 months away. There must be something brewing in the
Yeah,
Zeotap
no,
kitchen.
absolutely. I mean, the stuff that we are excited about mostly, I would say, from a product perspective, is all of our AI. I mean, the nice thing about being a GCP native company is the fact that you get access to the best AI in the market. I mean, honestly, like
Yeah.
it's like maybe I'm saying something contentious, and maybe people no, of course it's open AI,
No,
it's
no,
open AI or whatever. Google is at the
everyone's a guru, but nobody has the proof.
yeah, exactly. Google is at the forefront of this race. I don't know if if it's not that, but it's like, in the top three in the race. And
Yeah.
and so being a partner with them is really, really fantastic in that sense. And we are like, and so the thing that, I mean, to answer your question, really, like, I mean, like the thing that for me is personally most exciting is the Talk to Your Data initiative. So we're actually, this has been a promise. Again, I was a marketeer, right? So I mean, I've heard about Talk to Your Data, I don't know, 15 years ago. Like, I will just write in natural language, and then the analytics, this was like a heap analytics and like all the
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
amplitude and mixed panel. Everybody was promising Talk to Your Data, right? So everybody. And still to this day, I haven't seen any working model of that. But I do think that, I mean, we're starting to see with the evolution of, like, with the improvements of the LLMs and with the improvement actually of the machine learning around it and the
Yeah.
guardrails around it, we're starting to see stuff that actually looks very promising. So I'm very excited to have actually data democratized in the sense that, like, if I'm a marketeer, I can just go ask something
Yeah.
and get and know what is this segment, how is it performing. Like, this is very cool stuff that we are sitting on, and we are unable to bring it to the market, in the sense we have a lot of data, and of course and so, like, for us to democratize that will be pretty insane. The other thing that
Yeah.
I'm excited about, which is just because I'm a little bit of a geek, is um is the data onboarding. So data onboarding is like probably one of the most painful exercises, as in, the whole data mapping and the
Yeah,
taxonomy.
yeah.
It's I mean, it's like everybody's nightmare work. 3 days of implementation is around that. And we're seeing it, like, again, with AI, we're seeing awesome ways to minimize that to a very, very small subset of pain versus the original pain. So, I mean,
You're using AI to
yeah, yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah.
pre-fill the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
mapping,
to do
or
to pre-fill the mapping, exactly. And
nice.
it's pretty, it's pretty awesome. And
Yeah,
again, I'm not like an AI drank all the Kool-Aid kind of dude. I actually have probably because I'm old, but I have my skepticism about some stuff around there. But the
yeah.
stuff that I see that actually works and I can understand the logic why it works, I feel pretty comfortable with. And so these two areas, from a product improvement from a product perspective, are very interesting for us. And of course, we will have more composable coming in, and more zero copy kind of. This is part of. I don't know that I'm overly excited about this, but it's part of the world. I actually think
Yes,
I think this is
client demand.
exactly, this is a client demand, and I think there's an evolution that we've been going
Yeah.
through for the past year or so, and this will continue for next year for us. Absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. I think AI is one of the newer things that will uncommoditize CDPs again, because what I'm seeing is that a lot of companies are kind of taking their different approach to how they want to leverage AI and I'm looking forward to seeing those features released in 2026. Elad, thank you so much for your time today. Good luck in the continuing CEOing of Zeotap.
CEO. Yeah, I'm a.
ZEOing. Now we need to build something. All right, we'll figure something. I just don't know what the Z stands for. I'll need to dig around. But it was an absolute pleasure talking to you and hearing more about Zeotap, and especially your thoughts around the CDP space in general.
Same here. Thanks a lot, Matthew. Appreciate it.